Всем доброе утро.
Good morning, everybody. Today we are opening our second day of the forum, and I will be your moderator this morning. My name is Maxim Akimov. I am the first deputy chief of the government staff of the Russian Federation. And I'm a big fan of the transformations we'll live today and the transformations we will see soon as well, because now the world is changing in a different way, but transforming itself in this digital era. And we know that so many things will soon be implemented that will change our business models, that will change the algorithm of relationship between the business and the state and the society. And this is going to change the communication system between us. And we are going to discuss this today very much in detail in the framework of our first morning session, and addressing our speakers, our panel speakers. Let me remind to you that we will have 3 rounds of discussion. First, we'll discuss the global technology trends. Of course, we are talking about, first of all, digital technologies, and what do you expect in the coming 1, 2, or 3 years in terms of digital transformation? How do you expect this transformation to go on in different locations? Then we are going to discuss the role of the state, I mean both the federal, the constituent authorities, the regional authorities, what will be their role in the age of the digital economy, and how the relationship between the state and the business is going to change. And the third part of topics to discuss will be about globalization of businesses and how can we successfully survive in this globalization of business. And I'm sure that today we are definitely also going to touch upon cryptocurrencies and financial technologies, and we have many speakers from the financial sector here, and I would like to remind to you that digital economy is much more than just financial technologies or cryptocurrencies or whatever. And based on this agenda, we selected the brilliant speakers we have for you. So let me introduce to you our speakers. German Gref is the CEO and chairman of the executive board of Sberbank. Maxim Oreshkin, Minister of Economic Development of Russian Federation. Oleg Belozerov, Director General and Chairman of the Board of Russian Railways. Chairman of Внешэкономбанк, Olga Skorobogatova is Deputy Chairperson of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation, Guy Dietrich, Vice President for Global Innovations of Cisco, and Sergei Salonin, General Director of FinTech Association. Now, just a little bit of statistics for you. I'd like to give you some data based on results of 2017. More than 62% of incorporated business, including private entrepreneurs, more than 62% of businesses were incorporated online. 92% of patients delivered by ambulance to the hospital were registered and checked in the patient delivery ward in the hospital before the patients were delivered. 92% of passports were issued electronically first, and the cost of tutors' lessons was very much down last year because artificial intelligence-based educational platforms were gaining speed and popularity. And unfortunately, we cannot say that these figures are reflecting the reality we would like to have, but we do not see obstacles to having what we can have. So why doesn't it happen yet? What we expect? Because the statistics I gave you now, this is statistics coming from different countries. So why not in our country do we see it? So let's start discussing this, and our first topic, like I said, will be about the technology trends in the digital world. Based on MIT forecast, the most promising technologies of 2017 were quantum computing, artificial intelligence, biometric technologies, and cybersecurity technologies. And my first question goes to Mr. Dietrich. You, as a representative of a global company, which ensures leadership in your segment for dozens of years, do you share the opinion of your colleagues from MIT? Which digital trends do you see the most promising and leading ones in the coming 3 years?
There are multiple trends that are going on right now in technology. I do agree with MIT. Artificial intelligence will emerge in new and unbounded ways. Biometrics will become more and more important. But really what we're seeing in all of that is a result of what's happening in terms of connections. Today, at this very moment, there's 17 billion connected things and people in the world. By the end of the digital age, which will be about 2030, there will be 500 billion connected things. Everything changes at that point. Every single piece of clothing, every chair, every watch, every phone, every person will be connected. The result of that, it can be very positive, or without proper security, it can be a threat. So I think the primary trend that you're going to see beyond being connected is in cybersecurity. We have to get much better at protecting all of those connections, because with the right cybersecurity, every new connection is a new opportunity. Without the proper cybersecurity, every new connection is a potential threat.
Спасибо, Герман Оскарович.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I would like to address my question to German Griff. I'm sure that some of your employees are not even sure whether they are bank employees or not anymore, because your bank is now so digitalized that I'm sure it's something in between a bank and a technology company. So what technologies do you think will be the most important ones in the coming few years? Thank you. Well, you know, if we talk about technology trends, you can talk for hours about this. And Guy Dietrich said the main things with which I completely agree. Because we all work on these technologies, and of course artificial intelligence is the key technology today. This is the technology which is now absolutely available for all corporations, not just for major corporations, but also for SMEs as well. And today, this trend is actually shaping the latest transformations in all industries worldwide. And there is a large number of today's technologies I can enumerate for a long time, but I will not tell you something you don't know yet. If I may, I'd like to show you something, but it doesn't work. Yeah. So, just a couple of ideas I wanted to voice. Jack Welch is the person who was the founding father of General Electric, which is now trying to split because he grew it into such a huge, giant company that it is difficult to manage. And he said a very simple yet wise thing, which is about our attitude to the changes. He said it makes no sense to monitor all the changes because we will never be able to catch up with everything that changes. And you know, I do agree that we will not be able to be always in the picture with all the latest trends. And therefore, I have two conclusions for you. The winners today in this world are the ones who know how to focus, and no one company can drive on all the latest trends. So you have to be open to the world. And the key quality of a company, of a manager, is collaboration. It's the ability to listen and hear your client, your partner, your competitor. It's the ability to hear the people who break the trends. It's always a subjective thing, and it's difficult to measure the progress because there may be external progress and internal progress. And like you said, if we see that if we do not register online 92% of the patients before they arrive at a hospital and an ambulance, if in our country we have different statistics, it means that we are lagging behind these changes, and the external changes are happening quicker than the internal ones. And if we think that we are lagging behind the world, it means like the end is soon coming and you have to get ready for it, so to say. And if we say to ourselves that yes, that is the end of the world, then we have to do all our best to try to change it. That's story number one. And the second thing, a good leader wrote a book saying only paranoics can survive. The people who have a huge responsibility, like leaders of major corporations like myself, or governmental leaders who I do not envy at all because of responsibility level. And this, company like ours, which was 76 years old, I do not want to be the man who accelerated the death of my company. Of course not. I always want to be the one to carry my company forward. A second thing I would like to mention today, the key contradiction that we see is the infrastructure, the way we exist, and this is what our colleagues said, that everything is connected today. And this is about linear and exponential growth. This is the key contradiction today in our life, because we are now at this turning point of the curve. That's why we feel so uncomfortable, and that's why it's such a breathtaking time. This is a turning point in this curve which offers so many opportunities to those who are in this trend, who work in this trend. They love it. For them, it's a breathtaking time, and they want to go forward, do more, and enjoy the victories. And there are also those who are really scared of this change, of this turning point, because they are not in the trend. All of us would like to be in this green curve, in this breakthrough curve. And unfortunately, the states are often managed by people from the past. And there are those who think in a linear way, and those who want to live exponentially. And this is the key conflict and the key trend, as I see today. And number three, what response can we give to this trend? If we currently discuss at our session cooperation between the state and the business, we need to ensure a real perestroika, a real transformation of the model of collaboration between the state and the business, so that we do not find ourselves at the outskirts of civilization. Thank you. Thank you. Maxim, can you tell us about the current trends and current ideas at your ministry? So, shall we go forward? Yes, we are very positive about the new technologies we have. We are trying to implement these technologies wherever we can in the fields that we regulate. And I would like to talk now about the technologies that are very much changing and will very much change the Russian economy in the coming year or two. Remote identification and authentication technologies is the technology that is going to roll out very much, and this technology is going to very much change the banking world. It will change the collaboration between counterparties. It will facilitate this also for individuals. There'll be fewer intermediaries on the way. And if we look at the employment structure, at the ways that business processes are structured, we see there are too many unnecessary steps, unnecessary elements. So the new technologies will make the business processes less costly for the society and more efficient. And now we see more and more platform solutions, implementations in various areas of Russian economy. And here I would like to mention, for instance, platform-based solutions in trade and logistics. And this can very much shorten the chain between the delivery chain, the information supply chain. We see the effects of the system of Alibaba system on the Chinese economy. Now you see how available is a large number of products that people in other countries had no access to before Alibaba was born. Another platform-based story is the health sector, or development of small towns and remote areas in which telemedicine, for instance, is the only way for the time being to improve the quality of healthcare, because we understand that it is impossible to build a world-class clinic in every single village and remote settlements, but we can ensure access to best doctors to them thanks to telemedicine. Plus, in the services sector, we have taxi service like Yandex Taxi, and this again helps to shorten the way from placement of order to execution. And these platform-based solutions, they are being implemented more and more. And they also are a good solution for self-employed population, and the fact that this is a platform-based solution, the people that are currently employed in a semi-official way, they will be able to work officially. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Olga Nikolaevna. Clearly, the first response, which was in a way intuitive, of course we're talking about distributed registries, but the problems related to cryptocurrencies as such, I think that the agenda of fintech is not exhausted with cryptocurrencies. How do you rate the digital development of the financial sector in the next several years? Good morning, dear colleagues. In addition to the numbers that have already been mentioned by colleagues and friends, let me give some other numbers which I think give a picture of the global trend and which makes us act, really. If you look at the financial sector, you will notice that over 50 clients, customers of banks no longer visit the banking offices, but are served distantly. And the banks themselves are growing to understand, or indeed have grown to understand, that they have to be able to render services to their clients on an uninterrupted 24/7 basis. Now that necessitates new mechanisms for our citizens to be served in any geographical location of this country or indeed any other country, and to be competitive compared with other actors. So from the standpoint of global trends, this distant identification, including biometry, and the ability to use new technologies which we plan to introduce, and indeed the contribution of commercial banks, which are saying what would be convenient to them, is one of the most important tasks that we are seeking to resolve. And I think Mr. Gref has rightly said that we have passed from a paradigm of an opposition of the state and business to indeed a state-business cooperation. Digital economy, the program that has been initiated and which today is to be implemented, has indeed for the first time been based on this partnership private-public partnership or partnership between the business and the state. This is, I think, the first time when we have started to view the problem in this way. But the fact that we want to learn is to listen to each other attentively and seek common solutions. The digital economy per se is based on cross-sectoral interdisciplinary approach, and it seeks to bring to life a principle whereby we see technologies permeating and being synergetic for different businesses and industries. And the third aspect I would like to mention is a point of concern to an extent, because the issues of cyber stability and risk management have come to the fore. Throughout 2017, the number of cyber crime has grown significantly, specifically with respect to the new technologies which are just being introduced. And when we introduce technologies, we have to be able to introduce these mechanisms of cybersecurity, already embed them in the technology solutions which we're proposing. And this must be done both at the level of the state, when we speak about platforms, or at the level of commercial organizations which present new services to the clients. The Bank of Russia sees its role in soft regulation and assistance. Clearly, we are not going to be able to try and regulate how technologies work. We cannot and must not be doing it. But together with the market participants, we have to try and see how we can build a competitive market, to have players, actors who would be in a position to present financial services in the wide scale, including but not limited to services related to the state agencies. And here the models of the business are changing. In this we can see our active role. Thank you very much indeed. The Russian railroads is indeed a global company. It's monumental. Apart from the key role as an infrastructure backbone of the country, there's also the transit intercontinental role of the Russian railways. There is the big set of tasks related to ensuring terminal complexes, logistics throughout to railroad and railway management. So what, in your view, is the role of the digital platform in a company which was virtually formed during the first and the second industrial revolutions? Oleg Valentinovich. Thank you very much. Let me first subscribe to what my colleagues have said, and I may only add some relatively minor points related to the Russian railroads. I agree with Mr. Gaidar is that while we may be wary of technologies, we are entering this world. There is an increasing number of digital services implemented and related to both transportation of people and transportation of cargoes. This relates to the ticket and service vending online, the catering, the lost and found service, the And indeed, we can see that digitalization can be subdivided into two spheres, external and internal. First, it's the digital services provided to our clients, which includes the through-in movements. In many cases, people are simply not interested in how their cargo or articles are going to be transported from A and B. So the key word here is seamlessness. So we're looking at seamless technologies, trying to make this service as what they call the electronic exchange for making these technologies. The seamless technologies include client vendor or client corporation relations, which seek to bring into one logistical line all means of transportation that a person may have to use, starting from a taxi car through to the train. So we're seeing it as a digital reflection of the railway, whereby we have to continue making all of our project management digital and automated. Having availed of the algorithms that we already have, we believe that within the next 4 years, the entire Russian railroad system will be put on the digital track, if I may say so. So we also propose, I think that this includes predictive modeling, big data analysis, and a lot of other items that relate to result achievement. But AI in this is to play a key role, and a set of questions which we still don't have answers to, and I think that we will have to seek this answer, we will have to be discussing these, is that if an AI takes decision, or an AI module, if you will, takes decision which in any way may influence the lives of people, who will be responsible if something goes wrong. So I think that it is highly important to discuss this in the jurisprudence, in terms of jurisprudence, instead in terms of legislation. And let me also draw your attention to one other key element, which is what the colleagues have talked about, which is time, the factor of time, and the time for implementing the new technologies. The technologies are being introduced, that they are licensed, that they're sub-licensed, that there are some other procedural elements which need to be reviewed, but clearly the government must participate in this in terms of creating the conducive legal environment for such change. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Sergei Nikolaevich, as when you came to the bank has, I think, become very open to technological investment. What projects could you enumerate in terms of say, new clients or new projects? Well, thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for this interesting discussion. And we tend to distinguish 10 trends. And according to Cisco, my colleague from Cisco, There are, of course, more trends, but here we imply that every trend has sub-trends. But a prioritization here is important because priority can be different for different businesses and for different countries. So what priorities would I generally single out for Russia? These are probably three aspects which are actively developing, which is indeed AI, and AI becoming brilliant manifestations of how machine learning is invading the world of computer science and indeed of information. And we are seeing a situation whereby machines enter a new world of self-taught algorithms and deep learning experience. So teaching and learning about technologies is in a way a philosophy or a matter of attitude, a matter of perception. That being said, these technologies are to change and they will to a different degree be changing themselves. So many technologies, while they have different versions, localizations, would require significant reform. But if we ask ourselves if some technologies may be gradual and some may be swift and rapid, or a hype, which is a very fashionable term today, then I think quantum technologies are of great interest. This is an interesting piece of statistics whereby we can see the resources invested into the development of quantum technologies in different countries. Well, unfortunately, Russia is not among the leaders on this scale, but look at this very interesting line of the great investment and indeed into a technology which may change the face of the world. We have to understand that Russia must have a much greater accent on the development of our priorities and setting our technological priorities for the near and farther future. So when we speak about the convergent technologies, we have to find our niche and become a leader. So that pertains, among other things, to the digital policies of the government, or indeed policies of the government in the sphere of digital technologies. But on the one hand, as I said, we're all concerned, we're wary, but the change is happening a lot more swiftly than we expect. But as I said, we have to find the priorities. We have to identify what we're after primarily. Thank you very much. Mr. Solonian, and so what are we to do with these $20.5 billion that next year China will invest into the quantum computing? The $12.5 billion that People's Republic of China is going to invest into quantum computing. What does FinTech think about this? Well, we are talking about this. We are discussing this within our association, and our association today is primarily directed at infrastructure projects and developing so it's a unique environment whereby we can not only speak about technologies, but but having our hands on them, as they say, having an immediate experience of using them. So we're working together with the leading banks, and if we look into the future, where we're trying to discuss and focus, there are three technologies of the future which require immediate attention. It's the blockchain technology, which we believe will help to store universally and safely huge massives of data, and comparing these to what other companies do. So it's a globally distributed database of knowledge and data. And two other technologies, the quantum computing, which will lead or should lead or is expected to lead to an exponential growth in the speed of computing, and AI, the artificial intelligence. Juxtaposition or combination of these technologies, such as the knowledge base, the globally distributed database, and AI, will, in our opinion, allow to go at a principally new level of experimenting, whereby a machine or an AI module may be using phenomenal speeds processing and analyzing big and accurate data in virtual environment. So if what we're seeing today is the cutting edge of technology, is indeed the companies which can create new products and modify technologies. If we believe that machines are able to do this in a fraction of the time in future, in virtual environment, in looking at the results of these experiments at any given moment, modeling behavioral patterns, this may, as we believe, give the exponential leap and break us into, or indeed fulminate us into the unprecedented speeds. So as we speak about this first stage, the primary stage of cooperation with the state is transparency, which is the openness of the environments and systems. The second stage of cooperation is the openness for transaction, which is being able to work with the state to get a service or get a reference to make a payment. Then stage number 3 in that sense is integration, is that topic which we have been and are exploring within FinTech, whereby the regulator and us, together with the regulator, with the state, we are creating environments which we can commonly trust, in which we share trust. And it is here that we can see such environments to be evolving. And this would be a principally important new step. Thank you very much. And two other colleagues in the audience, I would like to give the floor to two of our colleagues from Microsoft, President of Microsoft Russia.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having a chance to speak today. So basically a lot of things has been said, and it's very difficult to add something on top. One thing remark I would like to make is that basically predictions are pretty difficult, right? We know this, and especially about the future, these predictions are tough. And Mr. Graf reminded me about the last discussion we had with Jack Welch, where we had a chance as a team meeting him. He said basically that he's now spending his time pretty actively, but one of the things that he's doing is investment, right? But he decided not to invest in technologies because technologies are too difficult to predict, right? So whatever we talk, we need to understand that that is not that clear and obvious. In terms of the trends, one aspect that I would like to bring, we believe in three key trends and three key technologies. Quantum computing is one of them. Artificial intelligence is the second one. But the third one is mixed reality. We believe that the combination of the three will be extremely powerful in terms of the way how it will change people's lives. Right? We will see this. We understand that this is a little bit long term because the three things needs to come together. Probably artificial intelligence is the most advanced out of the three. But the moment the combination will come into the play, the world will become really different. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. И партнер BCG Константин Полунин.
Thank you. And now, my role is to represent the shareholder of one of major corporations, working in all companies, and I'm a top manager at the same time. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation collaborating with a large number of other corporations around the world. And of course, like it was already mentioned, on the one hand, technologies bring us new opportunities. On the other hand, they bring new risks. We understand that we have to run faster every year because now the systems change, attitude to people change, intellectual property changes, everything changes. Our company works in many countries and we see that everywhere. In my second capacity, I am a consultant, and I can tell you we will never be able to foresee all the trends to come because every day there will be a surprise to us. Like Alibaba, 6 days ago won a contest, a reading contest against a human being. And this artificial intelligence was able to better explain what causes rain, for instance. We have to remember this. And number two, we cannot always ride the latest trend, but what is important is to turn it into a product, a service, or a market. And when a company can launch 100 satellites over 7 years, this really can change the algorithm of modern technologies. Satisfaction and demand, we have to know this. Time and location, another important element, and then capital, business models, and talents. Talking about demand, one of the trends we have to take advantage of is the following. Laziness is actually the driver of progress, because when you multiply laziness by wealth and other elements, this leads to growth of new multi-billion businesses. Last year, the CEO of Deutsche Telekom said that Europe is losing $100 million every day because of inefficient regulation as compared to Asian countries and the United States. So we can take advantage of this trend in terms of regulation to attract these $100 million per day and not to lose them. Capital. Of course, we understand that new technological solutions will require serious capital investment. What do we face now? It's still are before a tempest. If you look at $80 trillion sitting in bank accounts of all the wealthy people worldwide, the question is, who's going to open up this money stream to invest in technologies? And talking about business models and talents, okay, you know, revolution is invented by romanticists, it's done by bastards, and the fruits of revolution are harvested by sheer bastards. So the last thing I wanted to attract your attention to is that many things that we consider as trends, this is something we have in our everyday life and not even think it is a trend. It's like micrology. GLONASS and GPS accuracy of measurements. For instance, we remember compass, we remember watch and other things and other models of and means of measurement that made it possible to manage the transport systems and to development of geolocation. There was still a lot to think about regarding creating standards in the industries where we will not be able to commercialize our talents and technologies. Thank you. And this leads us to the next round of discussion. I'm a very liberal moderator, as you see, yet please do remember that we have limited time for our discussion, and we have lots of interesting things to discuss in our second round. Especially, I am expecting some criticism when talking about the state functions. So the question is, what do the authorities have to do to ensure successful digital transformation of the society which they govern? Because one of the answers can be do nothing, do not touch anything, just let us work. Do not interfere. But the state has several roles, as I can imagine. The state is supplier of data. For instance, we don't have much data, but to monetize, to digitalize something, you need to have data and generate them. The state is also the manager of the infrastructure. We have databases, data exchange sluices, and so on. Plus, the state has the state education system, so the state is supplier of workforce, and the state is a regulator. So, talking about our agenda and the topic for our second round of discussion, what is the state supposed to do? And I would like to ask this first question to German Griff. Considering your experience in the government, I think your opinion is of special importance to us. Thank you. Thank you, Maxim. You know, we lack vivid discussions, so I wrote down something. Something I heard from you and something I wanted to come back to. The Minister of Economy, he said a very truthful thing. You know, the whole question is, which model should we choose? The single authentication platform. You know, I really shiver when I imagine that there will be a mister who's going to identify something for my business. And I have lots of questions of how this guy is going to do that. Yes, one thing is if it is done by artificial intelligence, like our colleague from BCG said, like Alibaba. This, or NLP, they trained this model to perceive English language, in spoken English language, even better than humans. And all this belongs to China, to Chinese state, and you cannot interfere there. And the state is going to train this model based on its interests and ideas. There are thousands of players in the Russian market. We have very smart companies being among the top 5 companies in these technologies. And if there is an operator who's going to develop this technology for everyone, and this technology is different in different departments. For instance, we organized one of our startups. Unilab company is one of leaders in this, and we think, okay, we now have super startups having brilliant competence, brilliant models, neural networks working perfectly well. Of course, the dynamic models still have to be upgraded because statistic and dynamic recognition are different things. So if we focus on one thing and forget about image recognition, no, because every single division has its own specifics. And one of our divisions said we want to have access to the platform, but let us train our model on our own, because in our division we have very big specifics. For instance, they have in our national debt department, they have a separate neural network which is trained on specific situations to respond in a very specific way. And when we are talking about bots and other things, we understand that there are things you cannot even digitize, you cannot quantify. It's sometimes even goes down to the pitch of the voice, which should be recognized by the system, and you have to train it to do so. So when we are talking about formation of digital economy and considering this turning point, which was last year, I think 2017 was a turning point in digital economy formation, and now we are very much into it. We have lots of discussions of what to do and how to do that. And in our discussions now, we discuss the right things that we've never thought about before. But I think it's so important now to choose the model of these relations before we start regulating something, before we interfere into various areas. We need to decide which will be the model of interaction between the business and the state. Regulation, tough regulation, it's a bad model. I remember the good quote. A famous educator once said, if you are very strict parents and if you are very tough when bringing up your children, be ready that you are bringing up the most versatile liars in the world, because the person is still going to do what he wants to do, and he will learn how to report to you so that you hear what you want to hear. And if you take a state with small startups, with so many constituents and subjects, if we regulate it so toughly that they don't feel comfortable to work in the state, you can imagine the results. So you have to be very delicate when creating the whole infrastructure, because we do have problems now, real problems in creating this infrastructure. And the program, for instance, the HR and education for digital economy, it is a very important science. There are very many technologies that can be funded and whatever, but It's all about HR. I'm not a very big optimist in this respect, maybe, but when we assessed the development of quantum computing, we realized it is costly and it's a long thing to come. And we will not be able to do that on our own. That's why now we have to choose the right model for regulation. The regulation should be wise and not just tough. Maxim, can we go about it on soft pause, like German said, so that we don't scratch someone on our way? Can we go the way we want to go and we need to go, but softly? I think the main thing is that the state, by doing what it does, should not drag the economy back into the past. That's the main point. It's also about how the state goes about the laws, or if you take remote identification and whatever, there are technologies you can use in a narrow field, and there are technologies that are used widely. And I fully agree that the state should not be too tough a regulator to stop any initiative, any business. The volatility of cryptocurrencies, for instance, does not enable them to be used the way they currently are. But this technology attracts a lot of attention and a lot of investment, and blockchain and every other technology around it. It's all promising, and all this makes it possible to update these technologies. And if there is a complete ban on one technology, it means that other technologies associated and supporting this technology will also, their development will also stop, and it will not be a win-win situation. Thank you. But then I have a question to you. What about our law? It's based on closed chain. We regulate only what exists. But in the current world, it means that we have to regulate something that has not yet been born. So what should we do? We want to regulate all the new things that are coming, but before we regulate that, doesn't it make sense to see how these things work before we regulate them? Thank you. I know this is one of the things you are dealing with, and this is the key issue for our country in 2018. We need to understand how it all works in order to understand how to approach it. And we do not have a definite answer yet. We have to find the right limits beyond which we should not go, yet towards which we should go. Thank you. So, I do say that we work on this together, but we are going to have a voting session, be ready for it, and I'm going to ask the audience of our morning session what the state is supposed to do first, but we'll do that a bit later. Now, Guy Dietrich, you have a wealth of experience of working in various countries around the world. What do our colleagues in the governments of other countries do take on? Can you tell us?
Absolutely. The role of government in digitization and in helping guide the country through the digital age is critical. It's not overarching. You shouldn't overreach, as we've just discussed, with potential regulations, but there are certain things that government needs to do in order for the country to be successful. First and foremost, and you've already done this in Russia, is come up with a very comprehensive, well thought out digital agenda. I'll be critical of the United States for a moment, because we right now are one of the only developed countries in the world that does not have a formal digital agenda. And we're suffering for it. We're having to digitize state by state, city by city, rather than having a much larger framework that's been agreed by the government that everybody can fall under and that government can help fund. Now, I run a program, as you know, Maxim, called Country Digital Acceleration. It's a Cisco program, and it was born to help countries accelerate to the value of their digital agendas. You probably are aware that a lot of countries will, develop a national digital agenda. It's usually 20 economics PhDs buried at the bottom in the basement of some government building. And they generate this digital agenda and they announce it to much fanfare. And then it goes nowhere because nobody thought about the acceleration or the implementation strategy. So Cisco and my team came together and we built a process for how you can go fast, how you can actually treat it like a race, as many countries are doing, and how you can accelerate to the value of your digital agenda much faster. Importantly, we don't create digital agendas. We're not McKinsey, right? We're not Accenture. We're here to actually operationalize. As a result, we've selected 16 countries that we work with, and we don't work directly with private industry alone. It's the public sector that we engage first and foremost. Our sponsor in India is Prime Minister Modi. Our sponsor in Japan is Prime Minister Abe. It is that leader, that key person that can help drive this. Now, because of changes of administration, we get into the ministries and into the functional areas very, very quickly. But it has to start with that leadership at the top, setting the agenda. And then I believe that the government can invest in 4 areas. And keep in mind, we work with countries as small as Israel and Kazakhstan and Portugal, and then countries as big as India and China, and everything in between. It really transcends size. It all has to do with imagination, commitment, and vigor. The 4 areas that government can directly participate in are research and education, because it's been referenced earlier, you're going to see new technologies, new trends. We're now applying Moore's Law. Remember Moore's Law, doubling of processor speed every 18 months? Moore's Law is now being applied to innovation. You can expect that any innovation is only going to be valid for a short time because there's somebody in a garage in Greater Moscow coming up with something that's going to completely supplant the big boys. Research and education is critical because you have to train the next generation of workers for the digital age. Those skills don't just appear themselves. You have to invest in that. Business and innovation. You have to invest in business and innovation because the government plays a direct role in that. If you can invest in companies and set up environments where companies can flourish, that's the role for government. Then digital platforms. Digital platforms refer to those things that are called out in the National Digital Agenda that as government and as industry will really move the needle for the country. That could be education, transportation, healthcare, smart and connected cities. Whatever the country knows that they need, they can invest in. And then finally, infrastructure. Clearly, that is the IoT infrastructure, the Internet of Things, right? That's all of those connected things. It's Wi-Fi, it's ultra broadband, in cybersecurity. Each of those areas are going to contribute to something that government cares about very much. GDP growth, next generation jobs creation, and investing in a sustainable innovation ecosystem.
Спасибо. Хотел спросить у Сергея Солонина. Сергей Александрович, а вам?
If I may ask Sergei Solonin, what are you missing in terms of what you could be getting from the state, or else do you think that the state's participation is too overarching or too overreaching, as our colleague has just said? Well, which is something that we should be wary of. There's a general understanding that regulatory framework is doomed to be lagging behind innovations, behind the technologies. There's nothing to be done about it. But what is important is that the changes which are so swift for the regulatory, there has to be a general understanding of creating a new sandbox, if you will, a new way of testing new technologies even before we can make how to implement these. So testing is very important and very applicable not just to fintech. We have to realize that the situation in our country is such that we have a significantly high number of banks and virtually in any fintech or any association like ours is in a way fragile, and the government must be able to foster competition. And in this sense, I trust that the regulator will be more and should be more proactive. And unless we create a situation when the startups are just trying to persuade the banks to introduce new technologies, and often we talk to banks and startups, and banks are saying that it's easier to do something ourselves rather than outsource, and this may indeed lead to further concentration in the banking sphere, and the startups will have even less a place for maneuver. And one other point that I would like to make: it is important to understand that the government is very important for creating the environment, creating the atmosphere. This is not limited to the laws, but it is also about the general atmosphere of how the businesses evolve. And this atmosphere is a very multi-factor, multi-component concept, but the inflow of talent is directly dependent on the environment, and I think that this is what a state, a sensible government, must be primarily be occupied with. What do you do to attract talent? Thank you. Well, I can't help making some amendments to the initial program of this discussion. Mr. Griff, could you comment on this issue of the role of the banks, the concentration of the banks, and the relations between the startups and the banks? Well, in general, what Sergei has spoken reflects the global discussion. Concentration. The major bank in this country is an unusual situation. The fact that the Sberbank has held this huge niche is unusual. There are only very few countries where major banks have such a share, but concentration of several major banks in a market is quite typical for any country. That's number one. Concentration of banks is not particularly unheard of. In digital economy, we have three digits: 60, 30, and 10. And my colleague from BCG will probably concur with it. The digital economy is characterized with the fact that the winner takes all. 60, 30, 10. 60 for player number 1, 30 for player number 2, 10 for everyone else, taken together. And we have mentioned Microsoft. Now, Microsoft is a monopoly in the world, after all, and there was a time when Microsoft was litigated, but Microsoft has been able to hold on to its share, to its, if I may say, monopoly. And the fact that Microsoft has been able to restructure itself several times and to hold on to its position can only be applauded to. It's just a major achievement. Now, talking about startups, we're always trying to seek reasons in the external environment. Now we're saying, regulator, please protect us from major companies. I think that the entire development of startups, the logic of startup development across the world is one and the same. Try to develop something and then to sell it. And that's normal. That's perfectly normal. Only probably a very insignificant number of startups will grow into independent companies. Most successful startups dream of selling their product to one of the majors. That's normal. Now, in the year 2000, the startup barrier was $5 million. 2011, $5,000. So the barrier went down 1,000 times. 1,000 times. So the barriers are falling. We don't think we should be creating new barriers. I think that I agree that environment must be created, atmosphere must be created. I do not argue with that statement. But what is important is that we should not be erecting new walls. And before we try to regulate, so we have to have a sandpit, we have to have a sandbox. Well, when the first cars went to the streets of New York and Moscow, did we have traffic rules for automobile? So we probably should not be in a hurry. We should first see things happening and only then talk about regulation. And this is not a matter. We should not go into this world if you just want to double your capital. But we should not be erecting walls, for sure. With cryptocurrency, I think that we simply cannot understand what it will lead to. As Einstein had a discussion with Niels Bohr about quantum mechanics, they did not know what quantum mechanics would bring to the world. And that's normal. We should not understand, but we should not think that we are seeing something totally foreign. Thank you very much. We need cooperation. Olga Nikolaevna, we have heard several opinions, almost a stereoscopic picture. How do you see how to position the Bank of Russia in this as a regulator? Well, I see no principally different views. I do not think that we have in any way contradictory views. I think that that should be no preferences on the legal ground, and that's important in any market, including the financial market. But who I think that a lot depends on the kind of organization in the market. We should probably not expect that for all 600 Russian banks to achieve a great financial success. But with that, we have to understand that all participants of the banking sector must know that the government gives them equal conditions. And it is really up to them, to their talent, to their employees, to their technologies to prevail in a particular branch of business. What I think is important to change in the government, because I have had some experience working both in commercial banks and now I'm within the central bank, I think I see two things which preclude the state from moving towards a greater degree of partnership with commercial businesses. Number one is that in many ways the government is just trying to change its procedures all the time. I think that we should simply forget some things which have become totally inefficient. And in this sense, we just have to build our system of relationship with the business in an entirely new way, because the government naturally has an inertia. It is not just for them difficult to share information, but it is difficult to change a comma in an old instruction, and this, or code of rules, and this is an important thing. I think that otherwise in 6 months the business will say, sorry, you are on our way, you're not helping us. And we believe that if we talk about regulation, then we probably have to have a balanced view. And this includes the necessity to test, to touch the technologies, rather than engage in theory talk. So, together with our colleagues from Sberbank and other banks, we have enumerated the number of projects for the test ground, and only based on the results of these discussions, we propose to go on for further change, because we should expect that we will have to introduce significant changes to a whole set of documents, guidelines, codes of rules, normative acts, and do so only when and if we believe and we deem it appropriate. We are often losing or wasting in those areas which we are just wasting time by trying to take a specific thing throughout the line of command and the line of procedure. So I think that a change in the procedural standing order within the governmental bodies is important. And my last comment is on the employees, on the general professionals, staff, and we have to draw in talent. This has already been said, for these people to be able to become partners with the business. Otherwise, the business will have to pick up the task itself. So the personnel question, the question of professionalism is indeed up for discussion and among the most urgent needs. But unless we do this and make this investment into research and development, into the professional training, we'll have a great gap. Thank you.
Okay, I first want to say something to this. I'm very glad that we are having such a vivid discussion here. So there is one more topic I'd like to touch upon. I had a certain experience of interaction with the public authorities lately, and I can tell you that currently the situation is not what it should be. We transformed our company from a pure distributor company into an IT company. Now, IT is not just a service division, it's much more than that. Now, IT is ensuring the liaison with the customers, and now it would be good that IT be no more regarded as just a service function. Then it would be easier for us to communicate with the state. I fully agree with what Olga said, but I do not agree with how she suggests to digitize it all. I'm a pessimist in terms of recruiting the best staff available in the market to work in public authorities. You know, it's rather an exception to the rule if you find some very smart guys coming from labor market to work in public authorities. And I cannot imagine that tomorrow we'll have dozens and thousands of very smart, young, talented, experienced people you could find in the market. I don't believe they'll come to work in public authorities. I can take 24 hours to tell you what it means to digitize a major corporation, but digitalization of a state, this is a giant problem, and we need a different approach, because if we go about it in a traditional way, we will lose. The state does not educate enough staff to populate its agencies. That's why we have a huge shortage of staff to work in public authorities. And the state is really struggling, having nothing much to offer in terms of salaries. And that's why I think we should involve business in this. It's a different approach. 48 public services to the population is about half of all the services the population needs. Let these services be run by businesses. No, I'm not saying Sberbank should do that. Let it be anyone else. It could be some small IT companies. It'll be difficult for them. But anyway, all those who will free of charge undertake this, we are ready to undertake this free of charge, because we are the ones who are most interested in it. This is how platform-based power is born. Give it to those who will be ready to free of charge do that for you. And then you will transform the state in no time. The state will see its citizens happy. The citizens will have the services they want. We should be constructive. I think this is what we should do now. Okay, thank you. That's a reality of our communication now with Sberbank and other market players. Yeah, right. Maxim, can I join what German Gref said? Just taking this opportunity. You also want to do something free of charge? Or they are ready to pay even maybe to have the opportunity. As soon as there are two candidates, It's about money. Okay, I fully agree. We as a big entity will also fully depend on the state in some of our procedures. We are ready to invest and make this free of charge so that our processes go quicker and become more efficient for the passengers, for the processes, because we will win in this situation in any case. And I'm very much sure that we will meet each other and we will find a way to find an interest of us to do that free of charge in some way. And, I'm not going to talk about any applied sciences here, but I think regulation is necessary, but the question is that we should regard regulation thinking about security. Because in this case, either anything can be possible or anything possible can be dangerous. That's why the state should ensure security of a number of processes. It's cybersecurity, right? Thank you. Thank you. Sergey, my question goes to you. What are you ready to offer us free of charge? We are not ready to offer anything free of charge. Okay, so we exclude you from the list of our colleagues. We are ready to promote free of charge, maybe some technologies, not all. Like we discussed with Olga, let me give you an example. We see that the technology's development is much quicker than other things now. There are technologies that change in 3 months, for instance, in some pilot projects, but agreement on laws and legal provisions, this usually takes at least 1 year. And this problem, of course, makes the process of transformation much more difficult. That's why we have to look at the whole system when discussing transformation. Of course, we cannot for instance, if you take Zug, when they started using one of technologies in Switzerland, the problem is that regulatory environment, it really killed the project. That's why the state's mission is to ensure an appropriate environment for promotion of technologies. And it is the businesses who are the ones most interested and able to promote and drive further technologies. But there are still certain types of research that cannot be done by businesses. This is what the state is supposed to do, and like you mentioned, quantum technologies, quantum computing, of course, with the support of corporations, but still the role of the state should be the major one in this process. And that's why you have to think about all the elements of the process, and the state should lead in this process and possibly even fund it. Okay. I hope I answered your question. Okay. I see we have very different answers regarding how the businesses are supposed to collaborate with the state. So let's vote. First, you have to find the voting devices. And to activate the device, you have to press any button. And we cannot vote. It's not me who didn't give you the voting devices, even though I read that the panel discussion participants can also vote, but unfortunately you don't have the voting devices. So, On the screen, you see the answers to the question, what is the state supposed to do first to ensure development of digital economy in Russia? Here are the voting devices for you too. That's impeccable service. So to activate the device, please press any button. When the timer beeps, the voting starts. So let's vote. By the way, there are answers yes and no on the voting device. So, okay, we have to wait till the time goes out. So, we finished the voting, colleagues. Okay. Okay. Now, let us see your answers. Well, you know, for me, this is quite an unexpected result. The vast majority of you, even though you were supposed to answer only one way, as far as I understand, the guarantee of rights, IP rights, tax regime, market capacity, and all these issues are what matters most to those who present here. And then a little bit of HR, a little bit of regulation. Nobody likes regulation. It's a dangerous word, an ambivalent word, and investments and research is last. And of course, we are going to use these data further, but we don't have much time left, and this means that I would like to ask you a very quick question, the third question for our third round of discussion. And we said, and German Griff spoke about it, giving figures and facts. We said that currently there is a new type of power. It's a platform-based dominating power we have never had before. This is a power based on attracting billions of clients to its services, building externally free of charge business models. This means not local, but global market domination. And my simple and quick question to our panelists is, Russian companies in this huge market, do they have a chance to become really global? And if so, what do the corporations, not the state, but the corporations have to do? How do they have to transform themselves to take this chance? I would answer both this question and the question we answered. Because if you look at all the dominating companies worldwide, the main key to success is the people. The people working in these companies, because to dominate, to lead, you need to be able to have to build a team which is globally competitive. And I voted for item 2 in our voting session because personnel is what matters and differs. And we need to create an environment here to preserve the best talents in our country and for them to work in global companies. That's my answer to your question. My question goes to Sergei Salonin. Same question. Do our business companies have a chance Yes, of course. And if you talk about innovations or blockchain technologies, I go a lot to international conferences on blockchain technologies, and I can tell you there are lots of Russians or Russian-speaking Russian-speaking delegates at these conferences. Maybe some of them are ex-Russians now who have left the country some years ago. So we do have good potential. We have brilliant mathematicians. Artificial intelligence is also possible. It's a field in which we too can lead, I'm sure. And now talking about those who lead in developments in these areas, how can we make them come and work in Russia? And then we come back to what I already said. We need to create the right environment. And it's not just regulatory environment I'm talking about. Regulatory environment, it can ban, it can limit, it can forbid and whatever, but we really need to think about this environment. It's high time to do so, because now it's not the time when some know-hows ensure your global competitiveness worldwide in terms of innovations. Now, since innovations speed is impossible even to follow sometimes, it is the staff. I fully agree with Maxim. It is the staff that really makes the difference. And if we create in our country an environment which will attract talents from around the world, then it will be a win-win situation. If we do not manage to organize such an environment, the gap between us and the technology world will be only growing, unfortunately. Thank you. German, Sergey spoke about Russian-speaking delegates at blockchain conferences. Of course, the people can choose where to live and where to work. So what can we do with this? First, I would like to answer your first question. It would be stupid to say there is no chance. But to my mind, the chance is not a real big one. Should the state do something about it? Of course, we need to improve the geopolitical situation of the country. We are one of the corporations which was becoming global very quickly, but now in the sanctions era, it's difficult for us to work in other jurisdictions, so we are deglobalizing our business. Like Kaspersky as well, another good example. We can discuss this for hours. Again, this is about the contradictions between the global world and the exponential growth, linear thinking and local policy. These are two key contradictions we currently have. And this is what Russia and the whole world should do away with now. Number two, honest assessment of our potential in terms of blockchain technologies, in terms of artificial intelligence. Well, blockchain is just being born as a technology. We do have a chance, but we have a catastrophic shortage of staff, and this is a huge problem.
We're lagging behind in both the staffing and training of personnel. And we have also discussed with some partners that the issue itself is under-demanded because there's not much external demand. The demand will be growing, and when it grows, there'll be an acute shortage of personnel, and especially the Russian-speaking professionals in this field. So we have this major task, and if I could answer these 5 questions, I wouldn't really range them. That's how interwoven and interlapping they are. And as and we were introduced to a young lady. I think it was in the US. In the US, a chemist, a biologist. She went to Stanford, having defended the PhD at the Moscow State University, and she was introduced to me as a local star. And I asked her, why have you moved to Stanford? Is it because of the climate, or the sun and the jacarandas, or no? She said, it's not about climate, it's not about the sun. I was sitting in my lab in Moscow, and I'm sitting in my lab at Stanford, and it's not much. No, and there are theaters and ballets in Moscow which are wanting here. But she said, I only have a limited span for my R&D, for my research. At the Moscow State University, to order some reagents, I have to get a dozen signatures, go through 3 departments, and only then wait for an X amount of time to get them. What do I do here? In the evening, I go back home late, and I simply demand everything. And then late in the morning, when I come back to my office, to my lab, I have it on my desk. I'm not even interested how it is being delivered to my lab. And so this 1.5 months that I would have had to wait for these reagents at the Moscow State University, when and if you multiply it by the 10 years of lifespan of active lifespan that I will be giving to fundamental science, you will see this key difference as to why I'm at Stanford and not in Moscow. So not all people are willing to accept certain conditions or certain environment because they wish to be doing their job. They want to be centered on their profession rather than idling their time in futile and empty battles. So this is quite easy to understand. So these specific things, these startups, the scientists, the educators, these interviews must be run and see how the climate in the country must be changed and indeed embedded, improved. It's a coda. Guy, you're a global company and have been a global company for decades. It's not easy to keep your company in this status. What would you advise the Russians?
Well, first of all, Maxim, thank you for allowing me to follow German. That was brilliant. I hope everybody heard every word he said, because it's so desperately important to create the environment for innovation and success. That's what you have to do. Everyone, to your question, everyone wants to be Silicon Valley. I go all around the world, 30 countries a year, and they all say, how can we create a Silicon Valley here? It's not magic. It's organic. You establish the environment with smart regulation, not over-regulation. You allow that scientist in that lab to flourish, to come up with that innovation. You allow for the title of that intellectual property to be owned by that scientist in that university so that they can commercialize it. Just recently a study was completed that showed 40% of businesses that exist today will not exist in 10 years. 40%. That's true for Russia, true for the United States, true for everywhere. Why is that? Because of what's happening in the lab at Stanford, at Moscow State University, in the garages up the street. It's because everything's disruptive, right? You either disrupt or you're going to be disrupted. It's a fundamental choice. And that's what you have to acknowledge when you set up your systems for innovation. You have to acknowledge that the next generation of jobs aren't going to be created by the big companies. All the new jobs are going to come from small, innovative startups, which will become small businesses, which will become medium-sized enterprises, which will in time will grow into the large companies that will be replaced. It's economic churn. If you set up your systems in order to acknowledge that and be that adaptable, you win.
Спасибо. Сергей Николаевич, вы видите, кого можно поддержать?
Sergei Nikolaevich, what would you support as an Institute of Development for some of the global development? Well, we have the chance. We have a window of opportunity which may not be particularly wide, but we do have 2 to 3 aspects. Aspect number 1 is that market is narrow. Aspect number 2 is that the appetite for innovation in this country is still substantially low. And there is this problem of internal appetite. As I said, the market is narrow, and we can see that we are in a position that we have the potential to create and develop the technologies, not just in cryptocurrencies or in blockchain, because we have shown that there is the high popularity we have competitive professionals, so we have people who can work. What we do have to do is to create an ecosystem, and in year 2017 we have seen that, as I said, this appetite for innovation is not particularly high. So people globally start to seek places to invest. And today, by the way, the emphasis is in many ways shifting from America to China, and that's in terms of so the Indian and the Chinese markets, which are close to us, are interesting from the standpoint of developing or introducing new technologies, but this in no way obviates or rules out the necessity to cultivate our own environment, our own ecosystem. So as we say that the build-up of this system is phenomenally important. Thank you, Oleg Valentinovich. Well, we have a chance. We always stand a chance. In today's world, we may even have a competitive advantage as a global company. We do trust that the Russian railways is a global companies, and we believe that there's an increasing number of countries which are interested in being integrated with our system. So with that, we have to create the environment and think about the ways of how this environment may be favorable to the professionals. So I agree with Mr. Gref entirely. The position and the stance of the Bank of Russia, your recommendation for global leadership. Well, I am an optimist, and over the past years, over the time of our communication with the startups, with the businesses, it has been shown quite clearly that Russia is not wanting talent. Russia does have is rich in talent and has a lot of things to propose to those who would like to apply themselves. But apart from attracting people, it is important to take them through the entire system and make them feel comfortable for a long time. But the time is this window of opportunity is narrow. This time is short, and the question of involving these professionals who could help us to solve many questions at the state level, these questions must be resolved on the most part in this year, 2018. So I would like to wish everybody success in this. Thank you very much indeed. I promised to the organizers of the forum and to you, dear colleagues, for this to be a 2-year excuse me, a 2-hour, very vibrant discussion. And let me thank the participants for this very informal and candid approach. And let me help and wish all of us to have more talent flowing in, and the only reason for people to leave Russia would be some willing for some more sun and beach time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Уважаемые гости, пожалуйста, покиньте зал для подготовки к следующей дискуссии.